In 2025, Meta spent more money on lobbying in the United States government than Boeing, Lockheed Martin, or any other company in any other industry. They spent $26.3 million and they hired 89 lobbyists, which is roughly one lobbyist for every 6 members of Congress. And a significant chunk of this lobbying operation and these funds were aimed at just one goal, which is getting lawmakers at both the federal and state levels to pass something called the App Store Accountability Act. Now, on the surface, these various bills appear to be about protecting the children online. But when you actually follow the money and you pull the lobbying disclosures and you trace the different organizations that are pushing these bills, you're going to discover something very different. You'll discover that Meta, the company which has arguably done the most to put children at risk online, is now spending billions of dollars in order to put the responsibility of protecting children on their platforms onto somebody else. Now, to understand why Meta would want this so badly, we have to go back to 1998 when the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, or COPPA, was first introduced. The stated goal of that bill was, again, to protect the children under the age of 13 from having data collected about them through various websites and online services. When an online service was found to be in violation of COPPA, they could be fined up to $53,088 per violation if the company behind that platform had reasonable knowledge that a user was under 13 years old. Now, there have been multiple companies that have had COPPA violations brought against them along with fines, but Meta actually faces the biggest risk because they arguably have more users under 13 years old spread across their various platforms, especially on Instagram. Now, Meta claims to have no knowledge of underage users on their platforms, but a lawsuit that was filed by 33 different state attorney generals revealed that Meta has received more than 1.1 million reports of Instagram users under the age of 13 since 2019. And they also have targeted advertising directed at those users. I mean, they've gone so far as to send makeup ads to young girls who repeatedly upload and then delete selfies from their platforms, which they interpret as behavior that points to the girls feeling insecure about their looks. So Meta isn't just aware of this young user base, they're actively trying to maximize their profits off of them, and under COPPA, they could be fined more than $50 billion just for the violations that are happening on Instagram. Now, the main reason that Meta is lobbying for these App Store Accountability Acts is because these laws will shift the burden of determining the age of users away from Meta over to the app stores and the operating system providers. So if we look at Section 8 of the Federal App Store Accountability Act, it says that in general, an app developer is deemed not liable for a violation of this act if the app developer demonstrates that it has 1. Relied in good faith on age verification data provided by a covered app store provider, or it obtained a signal from a covered app store provider that indicates that the user is a minor, 2. Complied with the requirements of Section 4, and 3, reasonably conforms to widely accepted industry standards or best practices, or to standards or best practices identified by the Commission for age ratings and app content descriptions, and applies those standards or best practices consistently and in good faith. So at the time a person sets up their phone or computer, the entity that's responsible for the OS or the App Store is supposed to collect that age bracket information from the end user. And whenever that user visits a website or downloads an app, that age bracket gets sent in the background to the app provider so that they can determine what level of access, if any, the user is allowed to have. Now, as I've explained, the laws in their current incarnation do not require photo ID uploads or face scans, they just require the user to honestly disclose their age bracket. But if the user lies and says that they're over 18 when they're really 12, Meta has no liability for that because they're only required to read the age flag from the OS and App Store providers, so the burden of determining the user's age ultimately lies on them. And if that burden evolves from just relying on end users' honesty to collecting photo IDs or face scans, Meta won't have to deal with implementing that feature or keeping that data secure. The App Store and OS providers are going to have to do that. Now, the important thing to note here is that Meta didn't just show up to testify in favor of these bills, they actually wrote them. A Meta lobbyist walked into a Louisiana legislator's office and handed him the actual legislative language for a bill that would require Apple and Google to verify the ages of every user on their platforms. And they're not just active in Louisiana with House Bill 570, which Meta deployed 12 lobbyists in the state of Louisiana alone in order to pass the bill 99-0, which, by the way, goes into effect on July 1st of this year. Meta also hired over 40 lobbying firms to get bills drafted both at the federal level and state levels across the country. Meta has also funneled over $70 million in funds to different state-level super PACs and advocacy groups like the Digital Childhood Alliance in an attempt to cover up the fact that Meta is actually the company that is funding all of these bills. I'll leave a link to all of the research and cited sources in this video's description that goes through in great detail how Meta funded each of these different organizations in order to get these bills written and passed. So, California has Assembly Bill number 1043, which is already passed and goes into effect at the beginning of 2027. Colorado has Senate Bill number 26-051, which has passed the Senate and is currently in the House committee. Utah has Senate Bill number 142, which was the first to be enacted on May 1st of 2025. Texas has Senate Bill number 2420, which was signed into law but later struck down by a federal judge who said that it violated the First Amendment. New York's Senate Bill 810-2A and the Illinois House Bill 3304 are also both pending, and the Kids Online Safety Act and the App Store Accountability Acts that are at the federal level are also both still pending. So instead of paying fines for exploiting the children or, just choosing not to exploit children in the first place, Meta would rather spend their billions on lobbying the Zionist-occupied government of the United States in order to shift the burden of responsibility away from them so that they can continue exploiting children online without any fear of repercussions. And on top of the lobbying crisis, I also read today that Meta is going to be dropping the end-to-end encryption option inside of Instagram DMs. So they're not even keeping up the illusion of private messages on that platform anymore, even though chat apps with proprietary encryption really can't be considered private in the first place. So the big tech oligarchs, they're barely even bothering to cover up their control over the US government and the rest of the world at this point. But I guess the silver lining here is that all of big tech is not aligned on this, since Meta is basically kicking the responsibility over to Google, Apple, Microsoft, and those others, since they're the ones who have the operating systems and the app stores. And unsurprisingly, they're hiring their own lobbyists to try and fight against these measures. So we're going to have to see whose money ends up being the strongest, and I guess if you still believe in democracy, you could write your representatives to oppose these bills and actually hold Meta responsible for their profitable exploitation of children online. But if the Zuck wins, I suppose that's just going to be another check in the win column for the people who actually control the US government. And anyway, before I say too much and get this video wiped off from the internet, be sure to check out my online store, Base.Win, and buy my awesome merch or accessories for your phone or laptop. 10% store-wide discount when you pay with Monero XMR at checkout. Have a great rest of your day.